Hey, I think we might have a few more coming in here a little bit. I just want to say hello and welcome. Thank you all so much for joining me to this workshop that I'm hosting today about the end of life phase with our animal companions and how best we can support ourselves and hold space for our animals holistically, naturally, and move through the grief cycle, however that might look for all of us. So, I'm assuming everybody can hear me. If not, please feel free to kind of just unmute yourself and yell at me if something kind of goes funky or awry. And looks like everybody is muted. I appreciate that. Just to keep the kind of auditory synced up and from bouncing around, just stay muted if you can, unless something kind of goes funky. And I will start here in just a moment, but I just want you to know that, oh, thank you. You can hear me fine. Great. The comment section is a great place to kind of get a hold of me also. And if you can't stay the whole time and you have a question that you're just like, I want to make sure you cover this topic, throw it in the comments and I will definitely kind of circle back around and go through all of the comments. But I do ask that you hold your questions until later towards the end, just because I get really distracted and then I go off on tangents and I want to make sure that we get through all of the material today. And towards the end, I will have a Q&A. And I also encourage you, if I don't cover something that you're like, hold on, I want to talk about this because this is my personal experience, or these are things that I've observed, I encourage you to share. You know, this space is to help people move forward, to navigate things. And, you know, I encourage anybody to feel comfortable sharing if they do want to, but there's no pressure otherwise. Also, I will be sending the recording out. So if you do have to go, I realize this is in the middle of the day for some of you, maybe night. I'm not sure where you're coming from, but the recording will be sent out. And so don't worry, you won't be missing anything. Okay, I'm going to share my screen and I think everybody's coming. Everybody's here. So let's get to it. Okay. Oh, I'm so excited to talk about this topic today. It's kind of weird. I hope you're excited too to hold this space with me and for me. So, all right, let me see. Make sure you guys get a good view. Okay. All right, let's formally get started. Welcome to Peaceful Transitions. Different ways to support your animals and yourself through the end of life phase. Now, I have basically allocated 2 hours of our time today to go through the material. We'll see kind of how time allows, but generally what we're going to be going over is chunked up in 2 different forms, for the animals and for the people. So for the animals, we're going to go over signs that your animals are getting ready to transition, what you can do beforehand to reduce stress for yourself, for your animal, and for your family, ways you can support them gently and naturally, recognizing the signs and being sure that you know that it's time. You know, one of those questions that a lot of people always kind of circle back around to is, well, was it time? Was it the right time? Did I go too soon? Did I wait too long? And so we'll go over kind of some telling physical signs that your animals are moving into the transitional phase. We will also pair that with color, crystal, flower, essence therapy, different ways that you can kind of holistically give them energetic support and yourself as well. And we'll talk about what to do with their body. For the people, we are going to talk about the different cycles and phases of grief, pre and post transition, holistic and natural self-care techniques to help you kind of navigate the complexities of grief, how to navigate shock, and how to hold space for yourself, for others. And then we're going to talk about cutting cords. But that gets a little bit complicated, so we'll wait until the end to kind of dig in there. At the end, we will talk about what the animals want you to know. So as an animal communicator, I've worked with hundreds of animals and their people through the transitional phase, including my own. And I just want to share what the animals want you to know and what the people have learned and what happens to them in the afterlife, what they think about the death and dying process, and hopefully bring comfort to you no matter your experiences with this phase of life. So I just want to share a little bit of my animals and my background and where I'm coming from. My first big loss it was a little hamster when I was 6 years old. And he just died in his sleep, I guess. I don't know. He was alive one day and not the next. And as a 6 year old, I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to handle my grief. I was just so heartbroken. I remember sitting on my stairs, just sobbing my eyes out, not knowing why my heart hurt. And I apologize now if I cry today. It's just what I do. So I'm sorry if I can't keep it together. But that was my first encounter with grief, and I didn't feel supported. I didn't feel held, and I didn't know how to navigate that. So from a really young age, I was touched with grief. I was touched with death, and I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to navigate it. And then the other pictures here are just a handful of those in my life that I've said goodbye to, each one of them showing me a different story, a different timeline, a different type of grief, a different type of transition, from sudden to long and drawn out, some with heavy, heavy grief, some with complete peace and compassion. And so I'm bringing all of these different experiences forward today to share what these animals have taught me and what I've learned through all of the different kinds of experiences that they've shared with me. So for the animals, a few things that I've learned is that no matter the phase of life that your animals are in, whether they're young, whether they're healthy, they're adults, maybe they're in their prime of their life, having a plan, kind of just set back, tucked away somewhere in your mind, is going to be really helpful because, things happen, accidents occur, emergencies occur, and we have to make decisions quickly based on best case information, right? And sorry. I'm going to put my chat up here so I can actually see you all. Thank you for recognizing my feelings. But being prepared is going to help reduce stress on a lot of different fronts, because when you're making these decisions quickly in a stressful environment and you're just like scrambling, trying to figure out what to do in the moment, if you have a plan, if you've already kind of thought about this stuff, when it's not stressful and you have the space to do your research and think about it, being able to default there is going to be a life changer. And so the things that I always kind of like to think about is your vet always going to be available? Not always. Sometimes in an emergency or on a Sunday or, whatever reason, your primary vet, the one that you love, the one that you trust, is not going to be available for you for your calls. And so having 4, 5, 6 even vet phone numbers that you can call one after the next to find somebody to help you is going to be really helpful. Just have them on a piece of paper on your refrigerator or in your phone, whatever's going to be easier for you. Just having them available so you can go through all of them to see who can help you is going to be nice. Personal experience, if you're like me, don't be lazy. Get gas in your car or fuel or whatever it is that you use. In an emergency type situation, the last thing you want to do is have to pull over and fill up your tank. And I'm going to share a personal story here. I learned my lesson the hard way. I have a really mischievous Griffon, and when she was, I think, maybe 6 months old, she got into 24 chocolate espresso cupcakes. And I didn't know this right away. So she had eaten them And they had been in her stomach for quite some time before I realized it. And I thought, oh my gosh, she just poisoned herself. And we have to take her to the emergency room, and loaded her up, going to the emergency room as fast as I can. And I thought, oh my gosh, I'm not going to make it unless I get gas. Worst feeling in the world. So don't be like me. Don't learn from personal experience. Just put enough gas in your car to make sure in any type of situation that you can make it to the emergency vet in a pinch. Yeah, not a good experience. If you can, have an idea of where and how you want your animals to transition. If it can be at home, great. If it's going to be at the vet, that's okay too. You know, the animals don't necessarily really care, but just have an idea, like, what are the possibilities for you? Now, larger animals are a little bit more complicated because you might have to trailer them. For a horse, for example, you might have to trailer them. Somebody might not be able to come out. So just kind of have a plan, have an idea of what your options are. And then consider what you want to do with their body before the vet is asking you. So what do you want us to do? Have that plan. Do you want them to be cremated? Do you want them to be buried? Larger animals are a little bit more complicated because, you know, what are you going to do with a horse, right? You can bury them on your property if you have the space. If you don't have the space, they do have cremation facilities. They might be close, they might not be. For me personally, I have one in my state, but it's like one of the very few within the western part of our country. So it's like, if that's an option, how can you go about utilizing that option? If it's not an option, what are your next steps? You know, they have pet cemeteries. You can use a friend's property. I almost had to use a friend's property for my horse. You don't want the larger animals to go to the dump. You know, that's something that is really common. They just don't know what to do with them. So look at your options beforehand. Smaller animals, it's a little bit easier. You can bury them in your yard. You can cremate them a little bit easier. Almost every vet or humane society offers services. So just kind of have that, again, in the back of your mind. You don't have to have the whole plan figured out. Just have those thoughts kind of ready for default mode if that's what happens. Okay, physical signs that they're getting ready. Number one thing I want to share is that if you're here today, you love your animals, you're connected with them so deeply, so energetically that your intuition is going to guide you. Never second guess yourself. And through your intuition and through that connection that you have with them, your animals are going to guide you. So if your vet is telling you, well, it's time, and you're just thinking in your heart and in your gut, well, I just don't think so, not quite yet. Listen to that. I had a client just recently call me. She said, my vet told me it's time to put my dog down. She said, I can't do it because she's still doing okay. And so we had a session and she was right. Her dog was not ready to go. And she's lived 6 months very happily, very gracefully since then. So it's like, listen to your intuition. It will always guide you. You will never be wrong. Otherwise, things to kind of look for. And this is kind of tailored more towards if they're physically ill or aging, kind of towards the natural end of life process. They'll become lethargic. They'll start sleeping most of the day, loss of appetite. They will show signs of being uncomfortable, like if they have a lot of arthritis or other internal physical stuff going on, they might shift their weight a lot and just pace. Sometimes they'll pace around and you'll just know that they're extremely uncomfortable. Increased anxiety, hiding, especially for cats. Like if your cats are hiding or having their ears pinned back and they're not grooming themselves regularly, this is kind of a tell that they're starting to get uncomfortable. They're starting to move through a different phase of their life. Of course, make sure that they're healthy otherwise, and that's actually true. Always do your double checks. But some animals will also get extremely clingy and not want to be separated from you at all, especially dogs. Like they love to be next to their people. They might also be more aggressive if they're uncomfortable. especially if they're in pain. So just be aware of that. Some of the more prevalent tells, like we really need to be serious about making a decision, are going to be they're unable to go to the bathroom. They're not making it outside or into their litter box, or you're actually having to help them. Their body odor begins to change. Oftentimes, when the body begins to shut down, their breath will start to change, and their actual like normal animal scent will begin to change. So that's a tell that their body is beginning to shut down. They'll lose interest in all of their favorite activities. The spark in their eye will diminish. So when you look at your animal, you just see the life there. You can see the little twinkle. They're still in there. They're still doing okay. But when that fades, when it gets dull, that's when you know. That's when you know that they're starting to detach. They're starting to move on. And the other kind of red flags are they're having seizures over and over and over again, breathing problems, and ultimately more bad days than good. So these are kind of the physical tells that you can look at, keep an eye out for, and kind of gauge on your radar, what stage are you in? How are you feeling? Okay, I'm seeing the spark in your eye kind of diminishing. You're not getting up off of your bed anymore. Like maybe it's time. So, but again, lean into your intuition always. Sorry, I lose my breath when I talk. Holistic support. So these are 4 of the main categories that I lean into and suggest for clients if they have a few days, a few weeks, a few months, just kind of depending on your certain circumstance. These are things that you can do together with your animal that will create sacred space. It will create healing and bring in comfort and just kind of an overall sense of peace. And I like to pair these together. I kind of just intuitively use what I have on hand or what I feel like needs to be used for that day or for that week. But we'll start with color therapy. So color therapy is basically like every single color has a frequency, and the frequencies are healing in some capacity. Some colors are too strong for animals that are in pain, for animals that are moving out of their physical body. For example, red is one of those ones that you kind of want to stay away from. Yellow also, they're just kind of too vibrant. They increase inflammation and blood flow. And so I would recommend staying away from those colors and instead incorporate baby blue and baby pink. Those are kind of my go-tos because they're so soothing and they're comforting. If your animal has like inflammation or arthritis, I would lean towards the baby blue because it's a cooling type color. It'll actually help reduce the inflammation. If not, if inflammation isn't really a concern and you're just like, I feel like pink is the right way to go, use baby pink. It's the color of love. It's the color of heart. It's very soft. You can't go wrong with either one of those, really. If you feel like you need to ground your animal, dark forest green is really nice. It's the color of the earth. It will help ground their energy into their body, and black as well. All of those are really grounding colors. Lavender is, I would say, somewhere between blue and pink. If you have it on hand, great, use it. I just never have it, but lavender is a nice, really soft, soothing color as well. So any of those you can use. And the way that you use color therapy is you can get a blanket or a pillow, even a picture of these different colors. Or what I like to do is get like cut flowers and put them in a vase somewhere near the animal. The animals will pull the energetics from the color. So you don't have to do anything other than bring the color into their space. Blankets are always nice because they can lay on them, or pillows, and then they can kind of siphon the energetics from them that way. Otherwise, yeah, just bring it in and the animals will use it kind of as an unneeded basis. Sound therapy is also extremely comforting. 40 to 50 beats per minute is the tempo of healing, of soothing, of relaxation. So if you can find instrumental music to play for them, just quietly somewhere in the room or in your house or in the barn, if they're in the barn, just play that for them for a little while. It's nicely soothing. I personally like meditations. And what I do with the meditations is you can do guided meditations or just the kind of shamanic drumming or different types of music. But if you do the meditations and play the music for them or guided meditate, whatever it is that you're playing for them, if you sit down with them or near them and do the meditation together, you're going to create this beautiful, calming, healing, sacred space together. And I always find that the animals kind of gravitate towards their people if they do set that space and do set that intention. So that's a really beautiful way to kind of connect in with them and hold space for both of you while you're navigating certain situations. Crystal therapy is very similar to color therapy. It's just using a different kind of frequency. And actually, now that I look at it, the colors are pretty much the exact same. So if you have crystals, great, but it's the same kind of concept. If you have the crystals, you can hold them in your hand, and I like to pair the crystals with the meditations, for example. Just hold them in your hand and incorporate them into your meditations, or have them placed out on a table or a shelf or somewhere where the animals can siphon the energetics off of them themselves. And so amethyst is tranquil, it's neutralizing, it's very peaceful. That's a really all around nice crystal to use. Rose quartz is basically the essence of pure love. It's heart-centered, it's very gentle and peaceful, and it will reduce anxiety. That's kind of my go-to. I have rose quartz for all of my animals when we're moving through certain this type of situation. Smoky quartz, black tourmaline, and obsidian, those are going to be your grounding stones. So if you feel like you and your animal just need to be grounded and anchored in, bring those into your space also. And you can bring all of these into your space at once, or you can kind of say, okay, well, I want rose quartz and black tourmaline today, and just have them around and then go into a meditation, or, mix and match kind of whatever kind of sequence that feels right for you and your animal. And then flower essences is my last one. I always recommend flower essences. The kind of go-to essence is Rescue Remedy. It reduces stress, anxiety. It does the same thing that all of these do. It brings on a sense of peace and comfort and healing. And you can take it yourself, and you can also give it to your animal, which is actually really cool if you're taking essences out of the same vial, because you're sharing that space together, you're sharing that frequency. So that's something to consider also. And for those of you that might not know about flower essences, it's basically a little vial of water infused with the essence of a specific type of flower, which has its own healing properties. So you have some that are just pure, made with one type of flower, or you have the Rescue Remedy, which is a combination of a bunch of different types of flowers to create the one. So these are just ideas to give yourself space to connect in with your animal and offer some type of healing support. Okay, a few things to note as well. If you are in a space of just seeing the transition coming, and you have time to kind of feel into it, but you're also having all of these emotions kind of bubble up, don't hover, don't be too close to your animal when you're going through like these really intense emotions, because they're so intimately close to you that they can feel it, and it can actually increase their anxiety. And so, of course, it's important to spend time with them, but just recognize that it's okay to give yourself space too. If you need to separate yourself from the whole situation and ground, refresh, or go hide in a closet and scream and cry, that's totally okay. It's totally okay to do that. Just make sure that your animals are not part of those really intense emotions right away, just because it can amplify things that you don't want to amplify. And it wouldn't be intentional, of course, it would be on accident, but it's just something to consider. Let's see. Okay, for your animal, oh yeah. One of the favorite things that they love, is if you do have time to spend with them, share memories. The animals are going to go through a life review themselves, either before they die or afterwards. And one of their favorite things is to sit with you on the couch, on the floor, or wherever while you share your favorite memories with them, especially the ones that make your heart swell or smile and make you actually laugh. Like those are the memories that they absolutely love to hear you reminisce about. They just love to be in that space and share it with you. So if you can, that's a really cool way to connect and just look at their life and see how wonderful it is and has been. They also like it when you read to them or play audiobooks, or this is kind of paired with meditation or music, but the way that the voice comes out and the tempo of the voice is really soothing and calming. And I've had a lot of animals just say, hey, it's really nice to just have mom or dad read to me, or even the little ones have the little ones read to them, because it's so soothing and calming. And it again creates a really lovely space to spend time with them without too much pressure, of course. Okay. After they transition, what do you do? We already kind of talked about this in the checklist of things to consider. So if you're going to bury them, where do you want to bury them? And if so, do you want to have the hole dug already, or do you want to make that part of the honoring process? Make sure you kind of have that sorted out beforehand so it's not too stressful. Just, okay, now they're gone. Now what do we do, right? So if you're going to bury them, where and do you want the hole dug? Pre-dug. If you're going to cremate them, a few really cool ideas to put them in an urn, jewelry. You can also bury them afterwards, of course, or you can put them in an altar, or like I have a whole hutch full of all of my animals with their collars or their clippings of their hair, different types of things like that. Like whatever you want to do. This is really important. Whatever you want to do with them, however you want to honor them, that's exactly what they want. So they don't really care what you do with their body as long as it gives you comfort and it gives you peace. So there's a lot of different options. The jewelry is really nice, especially necklaces, because you can have them basically laying right against your heart all the time. So I love that option. The other thing to think about too is what do you do with their stuff, right? Do you want to keep it? Do you not want to keep it? Can you bear to look at it? Can you not bear to look at it? It's going to depend on the animal and the circumstance, of course. But one thing I caution is don't just get rid of things right away, because you might regret it later, especially if you're in an immense state of grief and you get rid of all of their stuff. And then later, when you come out of the grieving phase, you're like, oh, crap, I really wanted their collar or their bed or their favorite little ball, So what I do is I pack up all of their things, or I have somebody else do it if I can't bear to touch it. And I just pack it away. I don't want to look at it. And this is my personal preference. I know some people like to have their collars and like sleep next to their collars, put their collars or hair or whatever underneath their pillow so they can be connected. And that's totally fine. These are just ideas for you to consider. And then you can always donate their stuff later. Keep them on display, just think about what you might want to do or have in the back of your mind, what am I going to do with all of their stuff? Other ways to honor them that I know some of my clients have done, or I've just heard, the photo album is lovely when you can bear to look at their pictures. Sometimes it takes time to be able to kind of go through all of the different pictures and their whole life. But a photo album is really lovely. Memorial altars of, especially if they have an urn. The one I have pictured here is of one of my dogs and his collar. Donating to a specific cause, whether that be their stuff or starting a donation fund, is so helpful, especially if like they're a rescue animal and you want to honor them and the rescue that they came from. it's a really cool way to kind of give back in their honor. Memorial gardens or planting trees and shrubs in their honor is a great reminder of who they are and that there's still life and growth even after death, especially if you especially if you plant the shrub or tree alongside their ashes or their body, because their body will give nutrients to the tree or shrub, which I think is a beautiful process, kind of a good way to keep them alive in a different sense. Portraits painted are always kind of cool. You can also write them a letter, or I'm losing the term right now, but it's where you write an in memory and submit it to the newspaper or online. I don't know who has newspapers anymore, but you can write it online. There's a ton of pet loss support groups out there dedicated for people to make a post about their pet, write as much as you want about them as an in-memory kind of tribute to them. So it's a really cool way to honor them as well. I'm sure you all have excellent ideas also. I encourage you to share here at the end of what maybe you have thought of or what you've done to honor your animals. Okay, we're going to get into a little bit of the sticky stuff right now. We're going to start talking about grief and the cycles and phases of grief. And this whole slide here is to just depict that it's not a linear process. It's messy, it's gross, it's complicated, and there's no one set process. And so the 5, I quote, stages of grief are technically denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance. But there's a lot of subcategories within the stages of grief, digestive upset, fear, loneliness, extreme anxiety, fatigue. And this is just a few of them that I can think of on top of my head. So it's not easy. It's not streamlined. And sometimes when we don't talk about all of the other different components that can kind of present themselves, it can be confusing. I also just want to touch on pre-transition grief. This happened to me personally, and I got really mad about it because nobody told me that this was something that could happen. When I was moving through transition with my horse, I had about 6 weeks of really intensive care. I knew the end result. I was trying to fight for his life anyways. But, I was holding on, he was holding on, and we were moving through this together. Through the 6 weeks, I went through the entire 5 stages of grief. And I just remember standing, looking at him through my window, feeling all of these different things all at once, thinking, I'm so mad because I didn't know to expect this, and I don't know how to navigate it. I don't know what to do. I don't want to let him know that I'm already feeling all of this stuff. So just know that you can experience all of the cycles of grief before you are technically supposed to. Again, it's not a linear process. So pre-transition grief, post-transition grief, sometimes they merge. Sometimes it's like 2 totally separate entities that need to be moved through. So just know that that's something that can happen. I personally like to categorize the stages of grief in phases. And there's 5 phases here that I've kind of put together. It's supposed to be through like roughly a 12-month cycle. Again, there's no hard rules. It could be a 6-month cycle, a 3-month cycle, a 2-year cycle. I'm just using the 1 year to keep it, I guess, on average. The first cycle I find is the most intense, whether that be the first few days, first few weeks, first few months. This is the highest level of intensity. This is where anger can definitely spike, memory loss of your life together, numbing, anxiety. That's phase 1. Kind of just feeling broken, and extreme heart pain is something too. It's just like your heart is broken. Phase 2 is where you kind of come out of that really intense grief. You're beginning to find stability, but at the same time, anger, resentment might arise. yeah, again, you'll be relieved from the deep grief, at least mostly. It could always come back, at least in spurts. And this is when your memories are going to start coming back in, where you can maybe relive the end of life that day, the few minutes, the hours, and then start working backwards. What was their life with you like? What were your favorite moments? That's when these are going to start coming in. The third phase is acceptance. Okay, I accept this is a thing. They're no longer in my physical life. Depression definitely can creep in. Loneliness. But again, you're going to start seeing kind of like the light at the end of the tunnel, or you're going to start parting the dark clouds and get a glimpse of, there is going to be another happy day in my life. The fourth phase is where you start to feel normal. It's like you can go through a couple of days, maybe smiling, laughing, almost feeling like your old self again. And then at the same time, you might feel guilty and think, oh my gosh, I haven't thought about my animal in 2 days. And then you might not be able to forgive yourself because you're moving on. And that's okay. You can't hold on to them forever. And eventually you are going to need to give yourself space. And so the fourth phase is kind of trippy because you're like, oh, I'm moving on. I'm feeling a little bit better. I've moved through all of these really icky phases of grief, but now I'm not thinking about them every single minute of every single day. And so just be aware that if that guilt does start to come in, that's totally normal, but it is also okay to feel normal and feel good again and to smile and to laugh. And so this is a really good time to memorialize them if you haven't already. The photo collages are always really nice to be like, okay, let's put your life together and look at it. Yeah. So the fourth phase is a little tricky. The fifth phase is roughly around the 1 year anniversary. You're feeling normal, but at the same time, it's like, okay, I've lived a whole year without my baby. Triggers. You could definitely kind of default back into the second phase or phase one even. And so you might actually you might feel like you're going backwards when really you're just kind of letting it all sink in, that it's been a whole year, which seems like a really long time maybe. And I would just say be prepared for triggers and do something to honor them, to get yourself outside and do something that fills your heart up with love in their memory. That's a really great way to kind of just recognize kind of the anniversary. Okay, so we're going to kind of dip into shock, how to navigate shock, especially if it's a sudden departure. And then we're going to pair here in the next few slides, we're going to pair like certain symptoms of grief with holistic ideas. So again, these are all just guidelines. And if you're just thinking, I would never want to do that in that state of being, that's okay. Everybody's going to have their own process. I just know that these holistic ideas have been proven to be paired well with these symptoms. So that's what we're going to be moving through here next. The first 4 weeks, again, on average, are going to be the most intense. Fear, emptiness, anxiety, appetite loss, or even overeating could be some of your coping mechanisms. And kind of the more extreme symptoms are going to be memory loss, numbing, extreme physical pain in your heart, really intense emotions that you're just like, I don't know how to get rid of these. I don't know how to get through these. And we'll talk a little bit about that. But the intense emotions could come up, and they're very animalistic. And so kind of navigating those can be a little bit difficult and uncomfortable. But the ones that I want to talk about the most are memory loss. This one's a big one, especially if it's, well, I guess it's paired with a few things. If it's sudden and traumatic or prolonged and exhausting. These are kind of the two scenarios that I've seen memory loss occur. And it's disconcerting. When I had my horse with that whole 6-week period, when he died, I thought, okay, it was very peaceful. He went beautifully. And I just sat there. I was like, okay, I want to remember him. And this was like the next day, but I couldn't. My whole memory was wiped clean. And I thought, I spent 18 years of my life with him. Where is he? Where is he in my memory bank? I couldn't remember what he smelled like. I couldn't remember what he sounded like. I couldn't remember the day I got him. I couldn't remember what he felt like. I just like, see, now I'm getting all emotional again. It's so upsetting when you can't remember your loved one when you want to. Just know that that's a normal, it's actually a trauma response. It is something that your brain does to keep you safe. And in those circumstances, if it is trauma, or there's something called empathy fatigue, which is what I went through, it's your brain just trying to keep you safe. And so it just kind of wipes your memories clean until you are in a space and capable of actually reliving those memories and bringing them back. And I mean, your memories are going to come back. If that happens, just recognize that it's there, bring a picture out if you're ready to, but know that that's something that can happen. And I don't know, that's a hard one to navigate through, but I would bring a picture out and just sit with them, or go sit in the sun and bring myself back into my body and just let the sun hit my body, feel the warmth, feel the rays. And that's kind of how I coped in that regard, is just, I need to be in my body right now. And so I just did a lot of grounding. Imagery replay. This is another hard one. So if you witness something, if you see something, or I mean, even just a normal transition, if it goes beautifully, sometimes your mind will just like replay certain things that are triggering and uncomfortable for you to see or for you to have witnessed. And I noticed that those images like to come in at night, especially when it's really quiet and you're all alone and you're trying to sleep. These things are going to start to replay in your mind. That's okay. That's your brain just trying to give them space to help you process them. At some point one day, you're going to be able to look at those images, feel into them, and release the emotions tied to them. But not right now. Now is not the time. When you are in grief and extreme pain, now is not the time to look at those images. So what I would recommend is, if that's happening to you, number one, if you're not sleeping, if you can't be in the quiet, if you can't shut your eyes without seeing the images or going through the replays, or just like totally falling apart and having panic attack and anxiety, or just crying, it's all okay. Of course, it's all okay. But if you need to sleep, your body needs to sleep. And so what I recommend is listening to music or audiobooks or meditations, something that's not too interesting, because you don't want to get sucked in and then focus on that. You just want it kind of enough to distract you, enough to give you something to focus on until you fall asleep. And so a little bit of distraction is okay. And another thing that you can do with the imagery is, if you're not ready to take a look at it, say no. Don't give it power. Try to push it out of your mind and then replace it with something else completely unrelated. Like even something super mundane, like what did your childhood bedroom look like? Or maybe what's your favorite mountain peak? Or maybe what's your favorite book? Like just try to bring these memories in that are happy memories that you can kind of just focus in on. And then you don't give the power to the trauma until you are ready to do so. Other things I just want to touch on here: chamomile is a great herb, a great tea that you can have before bed, melatonin to help you sleep. And if you are a big crier like I am, you need to increase your electrolyte intake. You're going to be losing a ton of minerals and stuff through your tears. So you need to be aware of that and replenish through some kind of electrolytes. Coconut water is really lovely for that if you like it. Otherwise, not coconut water. Oh geez. Now I can't remember. Lemon water is a good one, and cucumber and mint is a good kind of combination to encourage you to bring in some high vibrational fluids into your body. Okay, shock. We're going to deep dive a little bit further into shock. We talked a little bit about memory loss already. And I just want to touch here on alternate nostril breathing, which is like if you're going to go through a panic attack or you're hyperventilating or you're crying so hard and you can't kind of bring yourself out of it, whatever you're going through, and it's not stopping and you need to bring yourself out. Alternate nostril breathing will actually bring your body out of shock because it has to focus on the intake of your air. And if you don't know how to do that, it's really easy. All you have to do, I use two hands. All you do is take your thumb, cover one of your nostrils, and inhale deeply with the remaining nostril open, and then exhale, and then switch. Inhale, exhale, and then switch until you kind of bring yourself back into a calmer state of being. So that's something that you can do, especially like if you're in an emergency type situation and you're kind of going 100 miles a minute and you need to ground and center and come back into yourself. Alternate nostril breathing, even for like 5 seconds, is going to be enough to put your awareness back into your body. So that's something that I like to have in my back pocket. Another thing, when navigating all of these heavy things, let the emotions flow through you. Like I alluded earlier, a lot of people that come to me, their animal is their favorite thing in the whole wide world. It's their child. It's the only thing that holds space for them. And when they lose this animal, it's like they lost a piece of their soul. And they don't know how to navigate that, especially when there is no support out there in normal society, at least where I am located, to go into such a deep state of shock and grief. Because it's just a dog, it's just a hamster, whatever the case, not having the support system or understanding that it's okay to grieve in this manner. Just know that one is okay, but the intense pain that a lot of people I meet experience, they don't know what to do with it. And I always tell my clients, it's okay to put yourself in a closet, shut the door, turn the lights off, and scream and cry and beat up the floor and like make a mess of things. That's okay, because all these emotions flowing through you are really intense and they need to come out. If you don't give them space to come out, they're going to come back until you do. So when you feel that flood coming forward, boxing is a really good one. Like if you're kind of one of those people that just needs to punch something or go for a really intense run or hike or whatever, like just move it through you however you need to. Water is always a really good way to do it too. Like just sit in the bathtub, bring in some salts, light some candles if you want to. That's a little bit more gentle way than screaming and kicking and crying. But that is another option. And just getting out in nature, just taking yourself for a walk, sitting with the trees, sitting with the sky, wherever you are, even in a park, just let yourself feel and flow and just try to let that pain in your heart and in your body go as best as you can. Okay, a few more slides of pairing specific symptoms of grief with holistic ideas. So this one in particular is your anxiety, detachment, loneliness, emptiness. Like these are the really low vibrational, just icky feelings that can come and arise. The holistic ideas have for you, if you're kind of feeling in this scope of symptoms, is to go slow. Be compassionate with yourself. It's like you don't have to get up and go every single day. Give yourself space to do nothing. Give yourself space to lay in bed all day. That's completely fine. Journaling is a really great way to bring yourself out of a space of detachment. Writing a letter to your animal is a great way at kind of just getting your feelings out on paper in a really kind and compassionate way. Aromatherapy is always really nice. Massage, bathing, like this is when you want to go slow. When it comes to appetite loss, do your best. If you really don't want to eat anything, the best thing that you can give your body is some kind of smoothie with vegetables and fruit. And I know that might not sound like something you would want, just because you don't want anything in your body, but at least even if you get a few sips in, it's going to be highly nutritional and it'll help with your mineral intake and your hydration. So just even a couple of sips. As somebody in support, maybe a friend can make you a smoothie and just be like, here, take it, drink a little bit. So those are a few ways, a few holistic ideas to pair with these specific symptoms of grief. On the flip side, overeating, masking your grief, staying extremely busy. These are kind of on the other side of the spectrum, not wanting to look at grief, kind of avoiding it. Craving sometimes the fattier foods, the salty foods, or the high carb foods is usually paired with these other types of symptoms. And this is when you want to slow down. Like if you're not able to stop and look at your grief, just be mindful of that and go slow. Like take yourself on a slow walk instead of a vigorous run. Do a cold shower, put your feet in the river, sit. Mint and cucumber water is kind of my go-to here because it's stimulating and calming, and back to the hydration thing, grounding, just be outside. And also be aware of what you are eating, because the things that we crave when we're grieving is to basically give us comfort, which, I'm going to eat a whole lasagna if I want to, if I'm really sad, but I'm also going to recognize what I did, why I did it, and then try to move out of that phase as best as I can to best support my physical body. Yes. This next group of symptoms is confusion, depression, dullness, getting stuck, not being able to kind of part those clouds and see the light beyond the grief, inability to go somewhere. This is where you can kind of get stuck. And again, be compassionate with yourself. Recognize, like, if you haven't gone anywhere for a few days or a few weeks, just try to get yourself outside, maybe for a 10-minute walk. You don't even have to go out for 10 minutes. Just make yourself go outside. Do maybe a little circle in your yard or around your block, and then go back inside. Just whatever you can muster up at this time. If you feel like I'm oversleeping, I can't get out of bed, but at this point, like, I know I need to, just try to go slow, get yourself out there, maybe have a friend come with you, one that maybe can hold space for you and not push too hard. On the flip side of this, if you can muster the energy to do some vigorous exercise, that will kind of stimulate your system and kind of kickstart you into the next phase. Although I know it can be very hard to kind of pick yourself back up and say, yeah, I'm going to go for a really good run, even though I haven't left my bed for 4 days. If you can, great. If not, just start slow. Vary your routine, get energy work, massage, different things that will kind of re-stimulate your body. A lymph node massage or drain is really good because it will help you remove all of the toxins and re-stimulate your inside, like the inside of your body. And again, nature is so healing. Just try to go out into nature, feel with all of your senses. By igniting all of our senses and paying attention to our taste, our smell, our touch, all of these different things can, again, re-stimulate your motivation to kind of get up and maybe go make a sandwich or do something else that might need to be done that day. So another thing is, when everything is kind of dull and covered in like clouds of gray, finding something that's beautiful in every single day, even if it's tiny, even if it's just a tiny little rock or the sunset or a cloud, like just one thing every single day will slowly build to 2 to 3 to 4 to, okay, the day is beautiful once again. So, okay, no matter where you are in your grief cycle, there are certain things that the animals always recommend that their parents do, and things that I personally am aware of, and I like to encourage other people to be aware of. Daylight. Bring the daylight in. Open your curtains, open your windows, open the doors, whatever you can to bring in fresh air, to bring in natural daylight is going to be really nice and helpful. Bring the outdoors inside. Cut flowers. This is one of the ones that the animals always recommend. Like, yeah, have mom or dad bring in some sunflowers or daisies or some kind of really beautiful, vibrant cut flower. Now, if you remember color therapy before, I said stay away from yellow and red. Well, in this situation, if you're kind of moving through grief, bringing in the vibrant colors like bright green, bright yellow, bright red, bright pink, all of those really exciting colors are going to be exciting. They're going to be stimulating and they're going to kind of give you a pop of energy. So fresh cut flowers of all colors, and including white. White's a really good one too, like the little daisies, the ones that make you smile. Bring those inside. They're going to help you increase your vibration. They'll give you something beautiful to look at. And that's the one that the animals are always like, tell mom to bring in cut flowers. So I thought I should add that one in today. Color therapy, much like before with the animals, you can have the blankets and pillows and things like that. But in this regard, what colors do you see that you're wearing? What colors are you putting on your body and how are they making you feel? And this kind of goes in with the bright colors, the reds, the yellows, whatever colors make you, when you're not in grief, whatever colors make you the happiest, wear those. I'm somebody who always wears black or really dark green. Like those are really grounding for me. But in a state of grief, I actually don't really have any other colors, but I do try to find things that are yellow or bright red or high vibrational, spunky colors to kind of incorporate into my wardrobe, because when I wear those colors, that vibration is connecting with my energy and it will help me kind of neutralize my grief. So what colors are you wearing? What colors are in your household? And how are they affecting your mood? Just another thing to kind of think about. And the crystals, I give you my favorite list of crystals to help with grief. For grounding, smoky quartz and obsidian, always hands down my favorite. Rose quartz for self-compassion. Moonstone is really nice for coping with change. I actually recommend having moonstone like tucked under your pillow at night, and so your body can absorb it while you're sleeping. And then for releasing stress and anxiety, you can use lepidolite. I can't say that one. Okay. Cutting cords. I'm going to check my time here real fast. Okay. Cutting cords. So basically, okay. I'm going to have to move back so I can show you a little bit better. I have my carrots in the middle of the slide because they kind of reminded me of the entanglement of energy that is our entanglement with our animals and with ourselves. So when we are intimately connected with anybody, whether that be a human, a tree, a place, an animal, it doesn't really matter. When you are energetically connected with something that you love, your energy intermingles, and much like this carrot, it kind of winds up smushed together in like this whole complicated knot. When an animal dies and they leave their physical body, what happens is your energy eventually has to return to you, and their energy has to return to them. And that's why it hurts so much, is because you love so hard. The detangling process of the energetics is part of the pain that we feel. And so I just liked, as the carrot is the visual, is like slowly the unwinding of the cords is going to be returning the energy to where it belongs. But the thing is, you don't have to do this until you're ready to. There is a way that you can cut the cords and help the process go faster. It's recommended, and I say recommended as a very loose suggestion because I think it's more important to do it when you're ready to, but within the first 3 days of transition, they say you're supposed to cut the cords. And basically all that is taking the energy in, like, from the top of your crown down through your body and saying, okay, I release the entanglement, I release the cords of my animal, and I return their energy back to them, and I call my energy back to me. That's all it is. But that's an extremely sensitive exercise because you just lost your animal and you want to hold on to them for as long as you can. And so after 3 days, maybe you're not quite ready to let them go yet. And that's okay. The animals on the other side, they don't care. They're just saying, return my energy when it's supposed to be returned. So this is just an exercise as you're moving through and you're starting to feel normal again and you haven't cut cords yet. Cut the cords, return their energy back to them. Your energy will return back to you. And that's just a way for you to help heal yourself and not necessarily heal them because they're going to be healed in the afterlife anyways. But it will help the grieving process and help you bring yourself back into equilibrium. On that note, also, just because you're cutting cords doesn't mean you're not connected to them anymore. You're just not entangled. And that's okay because you're still connected through a heart cord. Every single thought that you have about them, they're going to hear on the other side. So just because you're cutting cords doesn't mean you're going to lose any connection to them. Okay. Animals grieve too. Some animals grieve, some don't. We'll talk about that. But when you're going through grief, sometimes the other companion animals within the household are also grieving. And you can kind of tell that they are going through some changes because they might sleep a little bit more. They might look for their friend. They might not be interested in their daily activities. It's literally very similar to what we go through. They might just be sad and you might just know it. The best way that we can support them is, I don't know what let them see. Oh, let them see. I don't even know my own notes. Some ways that you can support them. Sometimes when we have our animals transition, say out of home or away from our other animals, like they don't make that connection that their friend is not going to come home in a physical body. And so if you can, if it's safe to do so, letting them see the body of their friend so they know what happened is going to be really helpful. It will let them know that they can move on and not expect them to come back in their physical body. Sound therapy, same thing as before, only a little higher tempo is okay. Smooth jazz is coming through. It's like one of those things that they really like is just smooth jazz. You can do grounding exercises together, but give them extra attention. You're going to need it. They're going to need it. They can also help you get motivated to go outside and do some grounding exercises or play with them. Just give them a little bit of extra attention. Energy healing is also really nice to help them kind of move through some of the grief that they're holding. And animal communication sessions can be helpful, especially if they are just not moving through the grief, if they're not making sense that their friend isn't coming home. Sometimes just like having an animal communicator come in and say, this is what happened. This is why they're not coming home in their physical body anymore. And you can ask them, like, what do you need specifically to help you cope? And then they usually come up with a few ideas. And they can kind of turn their own grief around in that regard once they kind of make that connection. Now, for some animals, they don't grieve at all. Even if you think that they are super connected, it's like, how come you're not sad your friend's not coming home? Well, the animals can actually see the spirit of their friend. If they're coming to visit, they can see the spirit. And so they're like, yeah, well, I know what happened because they're over here flying around the corner and like, I can't snuggle with them anymore. I can't play with them anymore. But it's like, I understand the process. I can still see them. I know what happened. And animals also just have like this totally different understanding of death, the afterlife. And a lot of animals just get it. Like they just get it. It's completely different than how people see death, experience it. And not to say that they don't grieve, because they do, but if they don't, if you're like, how come you're not missing your friend? That's okay. They have their own thing going on and they have an understanding of what happened. and cutting cords. So the animals will also cut cords also. And I didn't know this until my horse, he just taught me so much. When he died, his best friend was one of my goats. And after he died, the goat, Watson, would go lay down in the exact location that my horse was euthanized in. He did this for a whole week. He would go over there, lay in this spot for a couple of hours, and then he would get up and go. And he did this every single day for a week. And I thought, what are you doing? Like, this is really weird. One, I didn't let him see the body. But two, when I asked him about it, he told me that he was cutting cords, that he was going through the detangling process and returning the energy back to the horse and calling his energy back in. So if your animals do kind of bizarre things like that, just know that they're cutting cords, they're doing their own thing, they're healing, they're doing what they need to do to kind of move on. Okay. And just what the animals want you to know. Did you make the right decision? Yes, absolutely, always, every single time. Even if you don't think so, you did, especially if it was made out of love. You made the right choice. Did you wait too long? Absolutely not. No matter what, even if you think you went too soon, made the decision too late, they transition right on time, no matter what, no matter the circumstance. So they don't want anybody ever to replay those thoughts in their mind or question what happened, because it's exactly what they wanted, no matter what. And how do they feel about dying? They they describe dying to me as ecstasy, as getting rid of a bag of bones, because a body is so dense. And the way that they describe it is like they get released from their body, and it's like they get to just expand and be as big or as small as they want to. And the way that they go, or the place that they go, is just so full of love, so full of healing. And so for them, dying is usually pretty easy. It's second nature. And it's like they get to go back to their whole form and energy. And it's just like, it feels so good. So just know that even though it might look really icky on the physical level, the animals feel so good when they finally get released from their body. Um, an accident. I want to just touch here quickly on what the animals share with me with accidents or sudden impacts or things like that, that are just like, oh my gosh. What happens is their physical body, yes, goes through that experience, but their energetic body does not. So if it's if they're running into something, for example, like a car, or like it's a sudden impact, they get popped out of their body. They don't actually experience it. Yes, the physical body does, but the energetic body doesn't. And so their spirit, their soul, doesn't actually endure the pain. And I've seen this in action several times. I've seen it with people who die. I've seen it with animals who die. So if that is your situation, if that's something that has happened to you, they're not connected to their body at that moment. Same thing with seizures. A lot of people have like animals with seizures where it's a really long seizure and their animal just doesn't make it out quite right. They're no longer in their body. They can be attached to it until we make the decision, but they're not in their physical body anymore. Especially if, like, you notice they're really disoriented, they're running into things and they just like look like they're gone, but they're still physically alive. That's what the animals have shared with me, is like they're actually out of their body. They just need help, like cutting the cord, basically. Yeah, they don't feel any pain. They don't feel the pain during the end of life phase, no matter what it looks like. Even if there's a lot of pain that we see, like aches, pains, arthritis, they always tell me that they actually go into a state of numbness where like their spirit will just numb out. And so even the physical body has to go through the motions, but the spiritual body doesn't feel anything. So I hope that brings some comfort to anybody that has had those experiences. Signs from the afterlife. So a few things. I'm going to check my, okay, yeah, a couple things. Signs from the afterlife. They might come right away. They might come same day. They might not come for a few months. So just let the signs come to you as they're going to. Don't put too much pressure on looking for signs right away because it might just not be the right time. But what you can start to look for is like feathers are always a really good one. It's really easy for animals to manipulate nature's elements. So wind and moving feathers around or leaves and working with the wild animals is really easy for them to do. So feathers just randomly placed in your doorstep or on your path. When you pick them up, you're like, oh my gosh, that's from my baby. Like, you'll know. Cloud formations. When my dog died, on the way home from the vet, we saw a whole cloud that looked like a dog running in the sky. And of course, you can say, well, that's just your imagination. Well, it's not. That was from my dog. So cloud formations, they will speak to you in cloud formations. Dreams, your animals can come visit you in dreams. And the way that you'll know is it will feel real. It will feel like you were with them. It will feel like you could almost touch them. That's how you'll know that that's a visitation. Now, sometimes after we lose our animal, we have nightmares about our animals and we don't think that they're okay in the afterlife, or something will come forward. And that's just kind of our body trying to process a ton of stuff. Just know that your animals are going to always be okay. And if you're having nightmares, recognize them and just ask them, please take the nightmares away. And your animals can work on your behalf to reduce what's going on in your subconscious mind. Wind is always a really good one. So if you're thinking about your animal and it's a really quiet, still day, and then all of a sudden you get a little bit of breeze on your face, the moment you're thinking about your animal, or even just like a tingling on your cheek or on your hand, like that's your animal trying to connect in with you. They're really subtle messages. Wildlife visitations, hummingbirds, butterflies, dragonflies, really unusual situations are usually signs that your animal's trying to let you know that they're okay. And I'm going to share a story from a woman I met a couple weeks ago. She lost her dog 4 days before I met her. And she said it was just traumatic. It was awful, but she knew that her dog was okay. And the next day, this little bird came up to her doorstep and was like knocking on the door. And I think it was like a sparrow or something that wouldn't normally just like tap, tap, tap. And so she opened the door, she saw this little bird, and she's like, okay, that's really weird. Shut the door. The bird flew up to the window, tap, tap, tap on the window. And she's like, oh my gosh, I think this is my dog. And as soon as she had that recognition, the little bird like flipped up, did like a little fluttery spin, and then sat back down again. And she let her other dog out to say hi to this bird, and this bird like hopped right up to the other dog. It was a total moment, and it was like, this is very obviously a visitation from their animal, just to let them know that she's okay. And so like really that's an extreme story. They're not usually that obvious, but like hummingbirds coming up really close to you, or butterflies just like acting a little bit unusual, those are usually signs from your animals. You might also hear their name. Whether it's in your mind or just casually say you're going to the grocery store and all of a sudden you're like, wait a minute, that's my dog's name. That's a sign from them. You might just overhear their name. You might also get a smell of their scent, or hear like their usual noises, like clinking of their toenails on the floor. Things like that could happen. And those are definitely them trying to come in and let you know that they're okay. Another one that's kind of unusual is it took 2 years for my dog to come in and let me know she was okay. But what she did was, I was in my bed, no other dogs were near me or around me this day, and I felt a huge thud on the bed. And it's like, that was a dog jumping on my bed, like clear as day. And it was in her normal spot. And I looked up and I was like, that had to be Meadow. I just know it, even though she had been gone for 2 years. And it's just like, I said hi to her, I recognized it, and then I went back to bed. But it's just like, that was kind of weird. So things like that happen. You might even get a glimpse of them kind of in the corner of your eye, like a zooming, or you might think you see them and then you look and they're not there. That's definitely them saying, hey, I'm okay. It's all good. these are things to be aware of. Also, heart-shaped rocks, heart-shaped anything, that's always from your animal, always, or a loved one of some kind. Things to consider about receiving signs and symbols from your animals. Animals respect our grieving cycle. And the way that they describe this to me is like our grief is like this really dense cloud of darkness around us. And they just sometimes can't quite protrude it to let us know that they're okay to communicate with us. And so when we're in that kind of state, sometimes they will remove themselves from our energy and give us space so we can go through the process of grieving. Because if they're constantly around us, even in the energetic fields, we feel them, and it actually can prolong our grieving process. So they like to give us space, especially if it's really intense grief. And then they'll come in when it's not safer to do so, but like they don't want to trigger anything again. So they'll come in when they feel like it's time and you're ready. So sometimes if you're like, where are my signs? Where's my animal? I'm not getting anything. That can actually cause extra stress and grief and anxiety. And so I always just like to say, like, if you're looking for signs and symbols and confirmation, but you're not in a space of receiving them, just know that your animal could be giving you some space to move through the process. And they will come in when they feel like they can or they should, when they will find a good time to come to you. So don't try too hard to receive things. Don't put too much pressure on yourself for that. And just kind of let things flow and go as naturally as possible. Let me see if there's anything else I wanted to touch in on that. Okay. The last thing I want to share with you today is if you're interested in learning more about animal communication and possibly winning a free session, myself and a couple of others, Melinda Donaldson and Anita Gomez, we're starting a podcast series. It'll be on YouTube. It'll kind of just be available everywhere. It's called And the Animal Said. And we're going to be talking about animal communication, life, death, afterlife, the whole spectrum of animal communication and what the animal said. We're also going to be doing live animal communication sessions and doing a drawing, like through, not drawing it out of a hat, of course, but like drawing monthly or so to offer an animal communication session. So if you want to learn more about that, this is our website. I think it's up and running. If it was close to being available this morning, if not, it will be soon. And I will send all of this in the follow-up email with the recording. We're also on Instagram, and the animal said. And so follow us along there, learn more about animal communication, and maybe get a free reading. But I'm going to stop sharing right now, and I want to open the space for questions, comments, ideas, anything that you all might want to share. Okay, so if you have questions, comments, thoughts, please feel free to just raise your hand, and I'll call on you. And if you want to show me your beautiful faces, I'd love to see you. If not, I totally get it. But otherwise, thank you all so much for being here today. It's kind of a heavy topic. Not everybody likes to talk about it. And thank you for sticking with me and sharing the space with me today. So I hope you gained something out of it. So yeah. Okay. Questions or comments? I did see one person. Thanks, Allison. Okay, can I speak more about animals as guides? Yes, let me grab some water. Some animals, not all animals, will, after they transition, make it their mission to be part of our spirit team. So all of us have our own team of guides, of angels, of animals, of beings in other realms. Like we all have our own spirit team, and they act as our guides. Well, sometimes our animals will take up a spot in that lineup of guides, and they will actively be working on our behalf to give us guidance, to move things in the physical realm to help us have a better life. You can learn to communicate with them, ask them questions, and develop a different type of relationship with them. And I'll kind of just give you a quick example. So one of my dogs and one of my horses are actively on my guide team, and I tap in and ask them questions all the time. But it took me a few years to be comfortable and open up that space to just say, okay, I'm ready to have a new relationship with you. Go ahead and be my guide. What can we do together now? And so they'll just kind of actively give me a higher perspective and a different way of looking at some kind of problem I'm trying to move through, and kind of just be a sounding board for me. So they definitely can be part of your team. Why would an animal choose their death via attack from another animal? That gets really complicated. Oftentimes, our animals choose the way that they die, whether it's pretty for us or not, because part of their soul progression is to experience certain things on a soul level so their soul can evolve. There could be some kind of soul contract, lessons learned, karma with the animal that attacked them that they both agreed to go through. And it's just part of the soul contract. It gets really complicated. And so per situation, I would say like that's the generality of that. But I would say it's a case by case situation to really know what went on, why it went on, and to really tease out the soul progression and the higher perspective of that. Actually, what I would like to do, if it's okay with you all, I have Melinda Donaldson here. She's part of the And the Animal Said podcast. She's also a professional animal communicator. If it's okay with everybody watching here, I'd like to bring her into if you all have animal communication questions about death and dying, so she can also give you another perspective. So I can share mine, and if she wants to voice in anything, I give permission to her to also share. Yeah.
Hi everyone.
Yeah. Hi,
Oh,
Melinda.
I have a comment, just not on the last comment, but the one before that about animals and our spirit teams. Um, One of my very, very first clients taught me something incredible about animals and what they can do on the other side. Um, these people have been having a problem with a dog next door, and it was this little tiny dog that people were leaving out all night long, and the people were they were really struggling with it. They had a huge issue to the point where they actually had to move their bedroom into their guest bedroom to try and get further away from the dog because this dog was keeping them awake all night. And they had tried everything. They had, tried to talk to their neighbors. They had contacted the authorities, all kinds of things. Nothing was working. And the guy, the man who had was the caretaker of the dog that had passed that I was doing the session with, he goes, I just want to ask, can you ask him if he could help us with that? And I'm like, well, sure, I can ask. I had never imagined in a million years that this could be a thing. And so I asked their dog, and he said, yeah, he said, next time you're having this issue, just ask me. Um, they are not allowed to just intervene and do things for us unless you ask or give them permission to do so. So they they were like, okay. That night they went to bed. The dog was barking. They asked their dog, who was in spirit, if he could help with the dog. Within 30 seconds, the dog quit barking. The next day, the same thing happened. So always feel free to reach out and ask them to help you when they're in spirit. Sometimes they can, sometimes they can't, but give them the chance. Always feel free to reach out and say that because I was totally blown away. They were at their wits' end with this barking dog, and nothing that they tried helped. And their dog fixed the problem. So always give that a shot.
I love that story.
I do too. It's an amazing story.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Teresa has a question. At the time of my dog's passing, I had an extreme pain in my lower right abdomen. It continued for a time, and I thought it was a cord being ripped away from me, but felt this was extreme. Can this happen? Yes, absolutely. And I would associate that with cords not necessarily being cut either, but also being ripped away. It could also be part of the trauma response that your body was experiencing. Could be that you were holding some of the pain, some of the trauma, some of your emotions. Sometimes when we don't let them all out all at once, they kind of get shoved and stuck in certain locations in our body. That could also be part of it too, is just a lot of different complications going on in that one space. But I do know certain people have experienced really unusual things like that, where it's just like, how come my shoulder keeps hurting all of a sudden after all of this? And it's like, that doesn't even make sense. A lot of the times it's just like they're holding some of their emotions within their body, and it's like starting to cause physical effects. That's kind of my take on that. Yeah. Are there any other questions? Or I would also like to just let people share ideas if you have other ways of memorializing your animal or honoring them, or helping kind of guide yourself through that transition that I didn't touch on today. Is there anything that you all want to share that could be helpful for anybody else maybe listening? If so, you're more than welcome to raise your hand and share, or type it in the comments. Either way works.
Laura, the only thing I would like to say is when my dear old, I think he was nearly 16 last, not this one, I've got a Labrador now, the one before, he was about to transition. I sat on the floor and was bucketing in tears. And bless him, he said to me, "Oh, for goodness sake, the vet's given us 3 hours. You're not going to spend our last 3 hours bawling, are you?" I said, "Sorry, Zach, that was a brilliant lesson. Thank you." It stopped immediately. Bless him. He's still one of my biggest angel dog, I called him. Great teacher.
That's so cute, Allison. I can totally see that happening. That's so
So
cute.
that reminds me so much of something that happened with my dog. A little different, but when I went to pick up his ashes, and when I walked into the vet's office, I got the ashes. I was like, okay, just hold it together until you get to the car. That was my plan when I was walking out the door. Hold it together until you get to the car. And I'm walking to the car, and I got about halfway there, and I just burst out into tears. And my dog literally appeared in front of my face, like really getting my attention. Like a lot of times they'll just say things to me, but this time he was like, he literally appeared right in front of me, and he goes, "You know that's not me, right?" I was like, "Yes." He goes, "So why are you crying?" I was like, "Mm, good point. Thank you for that." But same thing. It's like he did not understand my grief at getting his ashes back. He's like, "That's not me. Stop it." It was just that meant so much to me because he was right.
I'm on mute. They really are not associated with their body anymore once they are no longer in it. I have noticed that too. I even have a horse who he's kind of mad at me right now. My one horse that I keep talking about, he when he died, I had him cremated. He's still in his little box, but this is the one kind of case that is different. He keeps saying, "Let me out of the box. I don't like to be enclosed. I didn't like it in real life, and I don't like it in the afterlife." But I'm like, "You're not actually enclosed in that. It's just your body." He says, "I don't care. Let me free." I was like, "Okay." So I need to do that still. But he has specifically asked me to let his body out of the box because in his physical life, he was raised kind of in an abusive situation. He was in a really small pen. And he was like, "I don't need that, even in the afterlife. Like that energy just is not a good match for me." So that's just kind of one thing that that's the only time I've ever had an animal actually care what has happened Otherwise, he's like, whatever, just throw me in the wind, put me in a tree. I don't really care. Otherwise, just let me out. Yeah. Okay, I do have another question. Is it appropriate for me to let my dog know I'd love her to be a guide for me when she passes? She's still healthy and relatively young. Of course, of course. It's absolutely okay for you to be like, hey, you can be my guide anytime you want. But actually, she's probably a guide for you now in physical also. A lot of our animals are acting guides for us in physical, and then usually they continue that role in the afterlife as well. Yeah. Good questions, everybody. Thank you. Are there any other thoughts or questions about anything?
I have one that it's a sign, or it's kind of a sign. And it's one that I get from animals fairly frequently. I call it drive the body. So what they do is they will sometimes, I guess, I don't want to say take over, but it's like they go in and they actually control the body of another animal. Now, the other animal has to allow this. They can't just jump into anybody, but it's almost like the animal. A lot of times they'll let an animal that they were friends with in when they were in body, or that they were close to, do it. But sometimes they just let other animals that they didn't even know do it. What they do is they literally take a moment and they jump into the other body, and it's like the soul that is in the other animal. It just kind of steps back. It doesn't leave the body. It just kind of steps back and lets the other one take control. So when an animal shows me that they're doing this, to me, it's always that you're going to see the other animal do things that it never did before, but the one who has passed did do. And a lot of times they tell me that they do this either to still enjoy the physicalness, like the pets or the loves. And sometimes they say that they do it because they still want to experience the food as well. But that's one sign that I think is extremely comforting for people. And if you don't know that that's a possibility, you'll totally miss it. A lot of people will say, when I tell them this, they'll be like, "Oh yeah, I've noticed that, but I didn't really think anything of it." Well, that's because if you don't understand that it can happen, you're not going to think about it. So if you have lost a pet and you have another animal in your home, sometimes they will let them do it, and sometimes they'll just let if you're walking in the park and a dog comes up to you, it can happen that way as well. So just pay attention for things like that, because that one is it's one that I think is extremely it's just soul soothing when they actually come through in someone in another body. It is just amazing. So
Yeah, that actually is a really good point, Melinda. That's never happened to me. That's really cool that you can recognize
it's never happened
Yeah.
to me.
Mm.
But I have many animals show me that, and
Mhm.
every time when they show me that, when I bring it up to their person, they're like, "Oh my gosh, yes." So
That makes sense.
yeah.
Um, yeah, so Darlene was asking if animals can come back to us in a form of a new pet. So that's one way. Another way is they might just literally transition, find a new body, and come back
Yeah.
as your next pet, and just continue the cycle of physical form, just in a different body. Reincarnation is something that comes through my doorway more often than I ever considered. So definitely they can. And
Yeah.
it doesn't alter their healing or anything like that either, or their lifespan. So they just want to continue their life with you. Yeah. Yes. Oh, this was less not deep, but less heavy today. I'm glad I at least felt like it wasn't too heavy of a topic, and I think we covered a lot of good things. Are there any other questions out there about absolutely anything? Since we're here, we might as well.
Could I mention something, Cara?
Sure.
There's a tradition in Ireland called the wake. I'm sure it's in other countries as well, where you lay a person out for 3 days. And when my cat got knocked down, I'd never been to a wake. It's kind of an old tradition now that's died away, but I waked my cat. Her sister's with me still. And it might not be practical for everybody, but it is the most amazing experience because just for those 3 days, I did nothing but play music and chat to him and cry and grieve. And then something magical happens on the third day. It was time, I knew it was time to bury him. And I didn't know that that time would come. And when I was burying him, his sister actually started, you know, the way cats would put back the litter, she actually put in the first piece of soil, and then she sort of ran around like erratically and was the most honest display of grief. But it was an amazing process. It was that magical moment on the third day when you just were ready to let go. And so if it's an option or if it's practical for anybody, I highly recommend it. It's called The Wake if you want to research it, but it was very powerful. It was really powerful. Thanks, that's all I want to say.
Oh, I love it. I have heard of Awake before, and I just thank you so much for bringing that forward. It's not something that, at least in my society that I'm familiar with, I don't know anybody that has, number one, given themselves space to be with a body for more than like 5 minutes, because there's just this sense of detachment, of maybe even kind of like an icky feeling, like, well, now it's dead. I just can't. There's kind of this weird. This is totally personal. The way that I was raised is like, when somebody dies, you just kind of like move on, like move their body away, close that door. But there is something really beautiful about honoring the process. And I recently actually just went to a grief workshop being held by an herbalist, and she lost her son through a tragic accident. And she actually did that whole wake ceremony, or the 3-day space, and she covered his body with flowers, and she sang to him, and she played singing bowls, and she burned some of her herbs. And it was, I mean, I wasn't even there, and it's just like I'm being flooded with emotions because it's such a beautiful process, a beautiful way to honor a body and somebody that you love. And it's like, why, maybe this is something that we should consider with our people, with our pets. And so thank you for bringing that forward. I really do feel like it's a sacred ceremony and something that might not be widely accepted where I live, at least, but it's something to try and consider and welcome in. So thank you for that.
Could I just add a little bit in case it is, because in Ireland we're kind of used to it, even though it's a tradition that is sort of, but there's what they used to do with the people is everybody would gather around the house, and there were kind of all lots of cottages in the country, and they'd all get drunk and they'd all tell stories about the person, and they'd be putting the whiskey in the dead person's hand and maybe the cigarette if he was a smoker. They'd be playing cards around the body, celebration. And there's a song called Finnegan's Wake where the man woke up after 3 days, and it's kind of a funny song. And there's a few films about it, but it's a really, I had never been to one, and it was just, it's just to plant a seed. It was an amazing experience. And even like there's a beautiful song called The Glen of Aherlow, where a woman buries her lover like a king and builds a cairn around him and lays him in ferns. A stone is a cairn, like a stone on the grave. And that's what I kind of did for him as well. I played that song about 30 times. It's the most beautiful song, The Glens of Aherlow, if anybody wants, Aherlow. And it's a beautiful song for grief. And I just played all the grieving songs, and I'll stop now, but it was just, I can't believe I got through that without crying. But it's an amazing, if you have the space to do it, it's like, I can't really fully connect with any of my other pets, but I can connect with, because I feel guilty or I didn't grieve properly, but I can connect with him, that cat. So thank you. That's just
that's so beautiful. Would you email me that song? Yeah, okay, that would be great. I would love to have that kind of in my resources and share that with whoever might want to listen to it also, if that's a thing. Oh, you're still muted if you're talking.
I laid him on ferns and rose petals, and his head was on elderflowers, and he had a lily in his hand, and then covered in soil, and then a stone. It was just so beautiful, and I just feel like I buried him like a king because he was king. But I'll write it in the chat. I'll stop talking now. Thanks. Thanks.
Thank you for sharing. That's so lovely. Oh, thank you so much for that. Let's see, we have let's see. It was so helpful to hear that the transition happens at the right time, no matter what. I'm curious if you've had experiences of really letting animals know that they can let go and pass as an alternative to putting them down, of course, depending on circumstances. So, unfortunately for me, I haven't ever had that opportunity to let them go naturally and just let them go through the process as their body could. I wish I would have, kind of in hindsight. So the chocolate lab that was kind of pictured in and out of this presentation, he had a sudden death. Something was not quite right. And I think what happened was when he was getting in my car, his appendix burst or something. Either way, he and I were sitting on the floor together that day. I'd already been to the vet. They said, come back later. After they already did the first tests. Well, he and I were just sitting, I was practicing my meditation. This is years ago when I was brand new at meditating. And so he and I were just sitting on the floor meditating. And I looked down at him and I could tell he was dying. He was almost dead. Like he literally was at that detachment, but I hadn't even had a moment to recognize that he was dying to begin with. And in hindsight, I should have given him the space and just said, it's okay to go now. Like, I've got you. I made the wrong call that day, at least in my mind, but I picked him up and snapped him back into his reality. And I took him to the vet. At least his daddy got to say goodbye to him. But in that moment, I feel like I should have done exactly that. But I have had clients who I've worked with through the end of life phase, and some of the animals are like, if I can do this on my own as a natural process of my life, then I would like to try. And, just giving them that recognition and that space, usually it's a really peaceful and tranquil way for the animals to die. And they do it on their own regard, and they do it through their own decision. They detach when they want to detach. And so I think if it is possible to give them that space, and you just feel like that's what they would want, then if you can handle it, give them permission to do that. I think it's a beautiful way. I definitely do think that that's a good choice to make.
So I'm going to talk again about the same dog that
Okay.
told me to stop crying over his ashes. He had some health issues, ended up having to have a surgery, and he was fairly old. After the surgery, as expected, we were trying to really work on his kidneys and make sure that because his kidneys were bad to begin with. He was almost 16. And one day I just looked at him and I could tell, we had been doing all the things, all the kidney stuff, the fluids, the diet, just trying to, and his kidney numbers had greatly improved. I just looked at him one day and I could tell he just wasn't feeling right. He wasn't feeling good. And I said to him, if you, if you need to, if you want to, just go. I'm okay with it. So this is where the story gets a little, it's not funny, but I laugh about it now because I didn't realize when I said that to him, I wasn't thinking. So later that evening, it was about 11 o'clock at night. He walked up to me, looked up, looked straight into my eyes, and fell over. And I picked him up and held him, and I knew he was dying. I knew he was getting ready to leave. And I said to him at that point, I'm so sorry that I said that to you earlier today. It's my mom's birthday. Please don't go on my mom's birthday. I don't want to think every year of my mom's birthday as being the day that you left me. He passed at 12:15 a.m. So he hung on for me for an hour and 15 minutes. And I felt horrible about asking him to do that, but I gave him permission, not completely not thinking that it was my mom's birthday. And then when he decided to go, I then quickly changed my mind and said, wait, can you wait just a few more minutes? And he did. So I felt horrible about it. And he was like, it's okay. I totally understand. And he just kept saying that. I totally understand. So he waited until we were into the next day. So it was the 23rd, not the 22nd. And they do have more control over this than what we think. I just it was just I really believe that if I wouldn't have said that to him, that he would have kept trying. And I could just tell it was just not. It was something that was just becoming. It was making him. It was making him tired. He wasn't happy anymore, and I just gave him that permission. So yeah, just be sure when you give the permission that you're okay with the timing.
That's a good point. That's a good point. I never
I
would have
learned a
thought
good
about
lesson
that.
that night. Yeah, I didn't, and I learned a very good lesson.
Yeah, it's a tricky situation. All of it is, honestly. Ugh, yeah. Thank you for sharing, Melinda. I always appreciate your additional insight. Alrighty. Are there any other questions? I don't see any in the comments. If you have any that you want to just ask, go for it. Otherwise, we'll close our workshop down. Okay. Alrighty, everybody. I guess that's all. Please feel free to reach out to me if something comes to you later today, tomorrow, or just whenever. I have an open door policy. Please feel free to reach out at any point in time with questions or stories. And don't forget to check out And the Animal Said. We would love to see you there if you want to learn more about animal communication. And yeah, thank you all just so much for sharing the space with me today and being part of my collective group. So I'll send the recording out at some point. Sometimes it takes a while to download, so I can't promise it will be timely, but it will come at some point today, hopefully. So otherwise, yeah, I guess have a good day, evening, night, whatever part of your day you're in, and hopefully we'll see you soon. So thank you all so much for being here.